Hello and welcome to today's episode. I am joined by Rachel Bulman. She is a wife of and then a mother of five,
Six.
right? Six. Oh
Yes,
my
six.
goodness, six. And she's a speaker. She's a writer, and just a woman that I actually really admire.
Thank you,
And
Valentina.
Rachel, I'm just so excited to have you on to share your story with our listeners and to just show for them to just see your heart for our Lord. You were just somebody I love your writing. I love just your authenticity. And I first actually I should probably backtrack. I first heard about you in your reality TV show, Meet the Bowmans, during the pandemic, and my husband and I loved it. And I just remember thinking, wow, like it is possible to have like a joy-filled Catholic large family that isn't perfect
Right.
but is striving after holiness. And it was just yeah, it was right. We watched it right when we first got married, and so it was very inspiring as we started that journey together. So thank you for allowing all of us to come into your home.
Thank you. Thank you. We had a lot of fun doing it, and the kids actually still watch it. So every now and then I'll
Really?
catch them just sitting down to watch themselves, but they enjoy it and enjoy hearing from, I guess, mom and dad in a
Oh,
way that that's the same way we talk to them, so they still love it.
that's awesome. Well, Rachel, just would love for you to introduce yourself. And I mean, I gave a little intro, but just where are you from? What do you like to do? And I have one question that I've been wanting to ask you for a while, but please just go ahead.
Sure, sure. So, like you said, I am a wife. We've been married now for almost 16 years in December. And then we have six children. We have one child in heaven that we lost right before our twins. And we are just so overwhelmed with the goodness of the Lord. My husband is a deacon in the church, so he's in his second year of being a deacon. And it's just been such a just a crazy journey. We had two children during diaconate formation. Right after diaconate formation, I would say towards the end of it was when we actually the Meet the Bulmans went public. And so it's been just a fun ride. And then in the middle of all that, doing all kids sports, and I actually homeschool two out of our six kids, and then the rest go to a great charter school here in our town. And I write and speak in the middle of that. And it's just, I mean, our life is very full, but it's very beautiful. And I really couldn't ask for anything more.
Oh, that's so great. So, okay, couple of questions. The Aghanim program, I've heard that it can be pretty intense. So,
Yes.
the fact that you had two kids in the midst of that, holy moly.
Yeah. It's so funny. I think I actually misspoke because we had half of our kids in diaconate formation. So we had three when we started. And then right after we said yes to the formation process and going through the first year of discernment, we found out the night before our first discernment class that we were pregnant with our fourth. And so my husband was freaking out. Like, he's like, I don't want to do this. He's like, this is crazy. And I'm like, listen, it's not like it's our first kid. Like, we can do this with our eyes closed. Let's continue going with diaconate formation. So we go in, we go through diaconate formation, and then the very last year, we found out that we were pregnant with twins during the very last part. So I laughed and told our bishop, I was like, is there like an indulgence or anything for the most children having had during formation? And he laughed. He's like, no. I was like, okay, well, I didn't know if you could like make one up, but I guess not. But it is definitely trying. I will say that the diaconate process is different for every diocese. It's up to the local ordinary or your bishop. And so for our diocese, it's 1 year of discernment and then 5 years of formation. And so that first year for us is one quarterly. I think it's a quarterly meeting. And then after that, you get together once a weekend, once a month for an entire weekend. And so they don't there were moments where parents, needed to bring their kids, and that wasn't something that happened all the time because, you really want to be able to focus and kind of put yourself into the formation there. And the first day was human formation. And then the second day was like didactic academic formation, because that after the process, all of our deacons have the opportunity to receive their master's if they haven't received it before. And so, I mean, it was just, there was definitely some stretching that happened during that time, but there was a lot of just sharpening of who you are and who you understand yourself to be and who you know God is. And it was a really, really beautiful time for us. Of course, it was a lot, but of course, the Lord was definitely present during it.
Wow. No, that's really beautiful. And just because I've heard that you, as the spouse, not only have to agree to it, to that your spouse would start the process, but then you attend the classes with them. So, like you were saying, so that's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was very curious about all of it whenever we were looking into it. So I called a few dioceses around the United States because I'm that person that's a little bit of a nerd. So it's like, let me find out what the other people's process is like. And I mean, not all dioceses require the wives to go, which I found very interesting. But when they've done studies, they found that a lot of those couples where the wives either have an option to go and then don't go, or where the diocese doesn't require it at all, um, they actually drift apart spiritually, and it becomes a bigger stressor on them. So I think for wives that maybe are going through the diaconate process and you don't have the requirement to go, I would make it your own requirement to go, because it's such a huge point for the deacons to be able to go through this, to be able to, find themselves in the Lord, to really discern this calling, because it is a calling. This isn't just something you get to add to your resume. This is a calling. It's a vocation within a vocation. So for them to be able to determine if they're really called to this, if they hear the voice of God calling them to the diaconate, they need to have you there with them. They need to make sure that what they're hearing is something that's also being placed in the wife of the wife's heart as well. And so it's a really beautiful process, and something that I definitely think that wives should go through with them. And some dioceses actually require an annual, like, written letter from the wives that say, I still give my yes to this. Because
Right.
the instant that the wife says no, he has to go on sabbatical, he has to take a step back. So,
Huh. Interesting. So you touch on a couple of things that I would love to just hear more about, just about this idea of a vocation within a vocation, but just shifting slight gears. Can you tell me about, like, how would you define, or how has been your experience of your vocation as a wife and as a mother, and how do you feel like it's changed over the last few years with
oh my gosh.
so many
I,
seasons?
yeah, I mean, I think I could probably even go back farther and tell you that when I was a kid, I never imagined that I was going to have six kids, or that I was going to be pregnant with seven kids, and then be able to have six kids here on this earth. I had no idea that this is what the Lord had for me. I thought for sure it was going to be whatever picturesque Hallmark imagery you had, like 2.5 kids, white picket fence, if that's what the Lord called me to. And there was definitely a point where I was like, no, I'm not going to get married. This is crazy. This is just crazy times here in this world. So, but then when I met my husband, I mean, everything was just kind of turned on its head. And fell in love, obviously, madly, deeply. And once I was able to find myself as loved in his eyes, it completely changes everything. And I always tell people that if you can imagine the person in your life that's filled with the most pain and the most hurt, but then imagine what they would be like if they knew that they were loved, like how drastically their lives would change. And that's really what's missing from all of them. Right now, I'm going through a theology of the body, a course with my boys. And one of the questions that I asked them the other day is, what do you think every person wants? And one of them said, to be seen. And then my other son said, to be loved. And I was like, well, those technically are the same thing. And I said, that's really it. Every person just wants to be loved. And when we realize that we're loved, everything changes. And so I know that for myself, that I knew it to some degree as a daughter to my parents, and as a friend, and as a sister, but I didn't know it to the depth that I found it in the eyes of my spouse. And so when I was able to actually allow him to love me, because even that was a struggle in and of itself, to just believe that he loved me, but then to continue to allow that love to flourish, to continue to allow myself to unfold in that love, and then to allow all of my shame to be absorbed in his love, was that's a constant thing. I mean, this is a lifelong formation that's required for the heart of the spouse. And so I know that as I continue to walk in that, I began to believe that I am who God says I am. And and you ask my husband, it's so kind and so sweet, but he always tells me, he goes, you know, you're like the freest person I've ever met. And I told him, I was like, you're a huge part of that. You're a huge part of the reason that I'm free, is because I was able to believe him and take him at his word, just like what Christ does for the church. Like we take him at his word that he loves us and he has called us according to his purpose. And it's the same thing with being loved by Jason. I know that I can trust him with my heart, and in that space I'm safe. And so then as we started to welcome children, which we were probably about 2 years into our marriage when we first found out we were pregnant with Gabriel. And man, we were kind of thrown through the fire with Gabriel. You know, I won't give out too much of his story because he's a teenager now, so a lot of the story is his own. But you know, we had some complications very early on. He's had a few surgeries, and he will definitely have some disabilities going on through the rest of his life. But one of the things that's just so funny, we were like, every time we've said yes to something, there has just been this huge, like, nose to the grindstone. We're going to throw you into the fire. We're going to really show you what this is like. And then everything after that has just been so easy because we've had such a trying time in the beginning. And I remember that after Gabriel was born and after we were in the midst of just a lot of the trials in the beginning, whenever he was a baby, um, I just looked at my husband and was like, this isn't real life, right? Like this all feels kind of like we're in a sitcom." And I remember when the second child came, there was definitely an increase of, you know, this could happen again. Like what happened with our first child could happen with this child. And there was just no fear. I remember like someone asked me, they're like, "Didn't you think it was going to happen again?" I was like, "No." Like we had a birth complication, and I thought, you know, there wasn't a part of me that was afraid that that was going to happen, which is very much a supernatural thing. Because I think, you know, rationally, most people would be like completely freaked out the whole time, and I just wasn't. And I definitely think that that is just has been a gift from the Lord, and that every child after that, you know, has been the same thing. Um, and I know that the more that I've allowed myself to to believe that I've been called to be their mother, that not just that this was happenstance, but that God intentionally chose for all of the cells to align, for all of the DNA to intertwine, for everything to happen so that out of the billions of people in the world that I would be the parents to these 6 kids. It's transformed my understanding of who God is. It's transformed my understanding of who I am. And one of the things that's part of our bedtime ritual is that either I will pray it over them or I will verbally tell them by name, you know, Gabriel, I'm so glad that I'm your mom. Or Abigail, I'm so glad that I'm your mom. And it's just such an important thing that we can speak over our children, and that we can then reinforce that identity for ourselves. That out of everything in the world, that God would somehow align all of this, that you could be this particular mother to this particular child at this particular time. God just loves us so much, and it's a great way to reinforce that.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Oh my goodness. I just wholeheartedly believe in the power of blessing, especially
Mm.
blessing our children. And we have a similar ritual, but I'm going to add that phrase, like just being, I'm just so happy to be your mom. Like every night, my husband will bless our son, and we'll just speak words of truth over his life, over his future vocation, over his heart, and just reaffirming that you are special, we love you, and God loves you. And I think that is so powerful. So I love that y'all do that, and yeah, I'm definitely going to be adding that phrase to each blessing. Wow.
Beautiful.
So you mentioned that you didn't imagine that you would have 6 kids, and just how what the direction that your life would take. You mentioned that your husband, he just, his love for you just allowed your heart to expand and to just have that freedom. So looking into the future, if you can imagine your life 10 years from now, what is there, or what are some of your desires?
Oh my gosh. 10 years from now. Wow. So our oldest kid would be 23. Wow. That's just heartbreaking in and of itself. And then our twins would be teenagers in 10 years. So they're 3 now, so they would be 13. And I think when I imagine what that would be like, I really just imagine almost the same exact thing that we have now, but with just bigger bodies. Because what Hopefully not bigger, you know what I mean, but just,
Yeah,
older children.
yeah.
But I think what I imagine is that we're still going to be very tight knit. Um, we were all talking not too long ago on one of our on like a road trip, and someone said, "Why don't we just buy that big piece of land?" Because I get like these random things on my phone. It's like such and such land is for sale. Not that we'd ever leave our home, but like those kind of things. And so I said, "Oh, look at this land." And so one of the kids was like, "Oh my gosh, what if we bought that piece of land and we all just built houses there and never left?" And I was laughing. I was like, what a joy to have children that love you so much that this is what they desire. And then earlier this week, one of our boys, two of our boys play competitive soccer. And so, of course, that makes things busy and they go out and play soccer, they have practice 3 nights a week and then we have games on the weekend. And I think one of them was sick. He had a fever that afternoon. So we decided to keep them both home. And of course, the fever alleviated like right in the middle of what would have been practice. And so we all kind of ended up in the pool. And so I laugh and I said, "What if we just save all that money and you quit competitive soccer and then we just do this every night?" Thinking he's gonna shoot me down. He's gonna be like, "No, mom, like I love soccer." And he's like, "Really? Let's do that. Like, let's just quit soccer." So that this can be my life is just kind of hanging out with my family and being together. And they love that. Like they love when we go, today is nothing else but family time. And so where we just clear out the schedule and this is just us together. And and I think that I imagine in 10 years that maybe we've taught them that those that are adults to be responsible and loving adults that understand what leisure is like and the purpose of work that still go to mass. Those are my hopes and my prayers, and that not just that it's a habitual thing but that it's something that's become transforming for them. And and then for Jason and I laugh because I remember dating guys, and I remember because Jason and I've talked about this. He's like, "When did you know that things were going to end?" And I don't know if it was just I would be dating a guy, and there was always this moment when I would look at a guy and go, "Yeah, don't think I could marry you," or look at them and think like, "I think this is over." And so it was always very clear this is probably the end of this relationship. And I told him, I said, "I just look at you, and I just never get tired of looking at you. Like I never feel like I exhaust how much I love you." And even now, we're 16 years into it, 6 kids and so many sorrows and so much laughter and so much crying and so many beautiful things. And we're still deeply in love. And so I still think that 10 years from now, we'll still be very, very much deeply in love. The other night we were at a bar out of town, and we're sitting there having dinner. There was another couple a few seats down from us. And then the bartender, of course, we're chatting it up with her. And somehow in the middle of all this, it comes up that we have 6 kids. And so she laughs. The bartender's like, "What? You have 6 kids?" And none of them could let it go. They're like, "You have 6 kids. We can't believe you have 6 kids. How are you old enough to have 6 kids?" All these things. And so then finally she looks at us and she's like, "The thing that I'm most amazed by is that you have 6 kids and you look at each other the way you look at each other." And and it's probably the greatest compliment other than, just being able to feel the joy that we have in knowing the Lord and being loved by him, is that when people see my husband and I speak together, or when people watch Meet the Bulmans or anything like that, they always, or even our own kids, when they look at us across the room, they're always like, "We really can palpably see how much you love each other." And the world just really needs that. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that people saw when we would interact on Meet the Bulmans, and just watching us just on a day-to-day basis. And even that night at the bar, it was like, wow, you can have 6 kids and be married more than a decade and still be madly in love with each other. And we're like, "Heck yeah, dude. Yes, you can do this." It requires some dang work, right? And not work on the other person. A lot of people hear that and they're like, "Work on the other person. That's easy." But the hard work is working on yourself. And so I think that hopefully in 10 years that work is not exhausted. And then if that work is not exhausted, which I know it won't be, neither will our love for one another.
Aw. Okay, so I'm sure those listening are probably thinking the same thing like that I am. So what tips would you have to maintain the love over decades?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So obviously our first thing that we have to do is like I just said, is to make sure that you're working on yourself. Make sure that you're maintaining your prayer life, maintaining your understanding of who you are and the love of God, and constantly growing and challenging yourself to know the church and to allow her to know you. So that comes in the form of prayer, but that also comes in the form of intellectual work. You know, a lot of, especially in the right now, we are in both sides of the spectrum. We've got teenagers, but we also have very young children. And so our lives are very busy during this time. And so when you're in the midst of this busy time, it's really difficult to kind of hold on to the intellectual sharpening that needs to happen, whether that be there's one side of it, reading spiritual books and reading books that challenge you spiritually, but you have to also find things that intellectually challenge you, things that you are trying to learn and things that you want to get to know. Now, I grew up Protestant, and that was just not a thing. I mean, I would just read a lot of spiritual books and a lot of scripture. And so when I came into the church and discovered the intellectual life, I remember just being so jolted by how much there is to know. And I really think that's really in the realm of like theology and philosophy. And a lot of people will read things from John Paul II or from Pope Benedict XVI, G.K. Chesterton, and they're like, this is really beautiful. All of those things are beautiful because they are very much rooted in intellectual life. And so if you pick up a book that seems dense and you're like, I can't do this, put it down and pick up another one, because the church is so beautiful and there's so many facets of intellectual life that you just haven't found the thing that the Holy Spirit is trying to bring you. And so make sure that you're doing that work, doing the work to sharpen yourself, bodily, intellectually, spiritually. Take care of yourself. You know, I think a lot of times we definitely want to put that thing on the wayside, and it's so important for you to take care of yourself. And we always tell our kids, you know, we want to be here in 10, 20, 50 years down the road. We want to be able to be here as long as we can, as long as the Lord would allow us to be here and be a part of their lives. That's an impossibility if you're not taking care of yourself bodily. You know, if you're not working out, if you're not eating well, if you're not making sure that you get to the doctor, moms, listen, moms are really bad about that. We will put off those visits as long as humanly possible
You know
to
my
making
list.
sure. Valentina's like, I gotta get off this call so I can make sure that
Yeah.
I make some appointments. But it's so important to do all of those things. And so those three facets of the person to take care of those things. But then as far as taking care of the other person, and then taking these tips now outwardly to your spouse. Number one, go on some dang dates. I think a lot of people, when I tell people this, they're floored. We go on a date once a week, without fail. We have to do it once a week. When
Wow.
we don't go once a week, maybe we have a really busy week and we wait 2 weeks. We cannot go beyond that. And even our kids know. Like our 13 and 11-year-old son, every week I put up our schedule for the week on the fridge. And now they've gotten to the point where they'll come in and they're like, so when's your date night this week? Because they know this is something that allows our family to work, is for mom and dad to have just a couple of hours where we go for a walk, where we run, even you're running errands together, you go out to have a drink together, you go and have dinner, something that the two of you exist outside of the 20 minutes that you get before you go to sleep at night. And a lot of people kind of fall into that rhythm of the day to day, and then the end of the day is literally you just trying to cram what your heart longs for in 20 minutes, and that you're just not you're not meant for that kind of reality. So really be intentional about trying to take a date night once a week. You can stretch it out to 2 weeks if you need to, but I would make sure to adhere to that. The other thing is that you have to assume the best intention of your spouse. Um, you chose this person to love them for the rest of their life, and that you would let them love you too. And I think what happens a lot of times, and especially if life has been stressful, if you're in this busy time or you're going off not very much sleep, the other person will do something and you automatically assume, oh my gosh, like they're the worst. Like they don't see me, they don't love me, they don't, all these things that we spiral. And instead, assume the best and see them for who you know that they are. Oh man, he's had a really long day at work. You know, maybe he's just really tired. maybe he needs to eat a Snickers. Just all these really, really kind of mundane things or trivial things that we don't realize really do have an impact on us, because we have to be able to make room and allow for some mercy there, especially when it comes to loving your spouse. Assume the best for them. And then remember that the constant work that you do on yourself will allow you to love them better. And so those two things go hand in hand, working on yourself, loving the other person. One of the things that's really important for us in our family is that we know that when any facet of our vocation is suffering, it's because our ability to be children of God is suffering in and of itself. And so if I'm having a hard time being a parent that day, then I probably need to see about going on a date, you know, or spending some time by myself and realizing, remembering who I am as a child of God, remembering who I am as a wife to Jason, and then I'm better able to be a mother to the children. And so it's really important to know that God divinely designed those vocations for the person. And anytime that they come out of order or you forget one, the others will suffer in that hierarchy. And it's very important to make sure that you are keeping those things aligned. And I think that that's probably the root of our success, you know. And I think that if someone's listening to this and maybe they've been married for many, many years and they're like, I still don't know how this applies to me in this period of my life, but I feel like my marriage has suffered. A lot of times what happens too, if you know it's later in life and our marriage has somehow suffered and maybe it's not as wonderful as it should have been, or you knew that it once was. Sometimes what happens is because of the hard work that it requires to have a marriage, and the hard work and interior work that it requires to see our spouse and to allow our spouse to see them, is that we then turn to our children as the to give us our identity. Well, if my marriage feels flustered, if I'm not able to find myself as a daughter of God, maybe I'll be able to feel loved if I become an awesome mom and just give everything up to be a mom. Forget about being a wife, forget about being a daughter of God. I'm going to go and really be a great mom. So you put all of your efforts into this for, 15 years. And then when those 15 years are over and the kids have left the house and you're just there with your spouse, or you're there alone and realize, oh my gosh, I don't know who I am as this person's spouse, and I don't know who I am as a daughter of God. It's not too late. Every day is a day to begin again. And just to go back and reconcile all of those things, reconcile with your spouse, reconcile with yourself, and realize that this was it, that order has to be maintained. Child of God, spouse to my husband or wife, and then to be a father or mother after that. And so we have to make sure that we maintain that properly, that we make sure that we water those seeds in the order that God divinely inspired them to be. And I think that hopefully will continue to lead you on the road to a joy-filled life and hopefully become saints together.
Yes, because that is the end goal. No, those
Yes.
are some great tips. And it reminds me of I once spoke with Deacon Harold Burke, and he
Mm,
shared something similar where he said, when you got married, the day of your wedding day, you weren't there with your kids.
right. Right.
I mean, you were marrying your spouse, you weren't marrying your child. So he's like,
Amen.
always remember that. I'm like, true.
Nice,
um,
nice little gut check.
yes. So Rachel, I wonder, like, with so many responsibilities, and I'm sure you get asked this question a lot, as a wife, as a mother, as a writer, as a speaker, and how do you balance it all? Like, what is the secret? Please tell me the secret.
Oh my gosh. So the secret is that you cannot compartmentalize those things. And so too often I think people divide up their lives according to, these compartments and these places where I am. And so they'll say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to be this way when I'm speaking. I can just shake off everything else because I'm going to go speak, and I'm going to go here and do this. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to write, and I'm going to be an author over here. And this is where I'm a mother and this is where I'm a father. And it just doesn't work that way, because you are one person that is not meant to be divided. You are not a person that's meant to live a duplicitous life. And so whenever you practice true what they call in Greek, it's called the Zoe life, like this life that is everlasting, the Zoe. When you practice this, it has to get rid of all of the walls that we build between these compartments. And so when I'm over here speaking, I'm speaking as a wife, mother, and a daughter of God. I'm speaking as an author. I'm speaking as a mom that's on the soccer sidelines screaming her head off when she probably shouldn't be. I'm speaking as that person. When I am a mom, I am speaking as I'm a mom as Jason's wife. I'm a mom who's an author. I'm a mom who's a speaker. All of these various things, I can't compartmentalize who I am, nor should you compartmentalize what you do, because what you do actually flows from who you are. The other thing too is just, I think that you even said it earlier, and it was so kind. And every time I hear people say this about me, I'm always floored. But just the fact that, you're just really authentic, I really appreciate your authenticity. And I think that it really does come from not allowing myself to be different things in different spaces. And I love, there's always like this quote that flows around every now and then. That's like, you're not too much for anybody. You're just not the thing that everybody wants, or something like that. And I think that if you're not able to be yourself in certain spaces, then you shouldn't be in that space. You should allow yourself to be who God has called you to be at every table. And if for some reason that table doesn't allow you a seat there, then you weren't meant to sit there. You should go and move on to where someone sees you for who you are and appreciates who you are. But the secret really is just to allow all things to flow from that space. I always tell people that when I write things, whether it be a talk that I'm getting ready to give, or a book, or an article, those things don't go out into the world unless Jason has seen them, because he is my first audience that God has entrusted to me as my spouse. And then the kids hear about it, and they listen to it, and they know this. So everything flows out of this space. If I go into any place where I'm going to speak, or write an article, and they're like, oh well, we really don't want you to speak about being a wife or being a mom, I'm like, oh well, then I guess you really don't want me to speak at all. Or you don't want me to write, because this is part of who I am. This is actually giving me the greatest lens into the love of God, is through my vocation. And I think when we separate those things, when we compartmentalize things, it's really exhausting. It's exhausting to live in that way. And so I think the balance is a facade. It's not a real thing. It's an impossibility to be balanced. But it is not an impossibility to live a life that is centered on who God is and who God is calling you to be.
That makes sense. Um, so one question, actually, I do want to touch on your show, Meet the Bulmans. How did that come about? And are there plans to have more episodes?
So, Word on Fire, they were doing some really beautiful things with their YouTube channel. We saw the Father Stephen Gadbury's movie on being a Catholic priest came out of there. God and Gaming happened during the same time. And there was just some really beautiful series that they decided to put out. And one of those series ended up being Meet the Bulmans. And I remember when Father Steve Grinnell called me, he called Jason and I, and he said, listen, he goes, we have this idea. Because I was going to talk to you about it a while back, and whatever reason, we just didn't talk. And then you announced that you were having twins. And I thought to myself, I can't ask them now. And so he said, but I think I'm going to ask you anyway. And so we were probably, I want to say, maybe 5 or 6 months pregnant with the twins at this time. And so they came in and asked, would you be willing to do Meet the Bulmans, a reality television show about your family? And I remember laughing and going, what does that mean? Like, is this like Big Brother from CBS, where they're like following you around and like there's cameras in my house? I don't want to do that. And so we set the kids down. Jason and I decided that we were going to say yes. And so we set them down and asked them about it. And they were, of course, excited, because, all of our kids are growing up in this reality where YouTube is like, this is the goal. Like, this is the goal of my life, is to be on YouTube. So they were all in. And so we said yes. And it was hilarious, because during this time, the producers with Word on Fire called, and they said, so the way that we're going to do it is we're going to send a bunch of camera equipment there. And then we're going to send out 2 producers to help you film the first one, and then just give you all of the parameters so that after that you could film all of it there, and then you would send it to us and we would then edit it. And so all of this stuff is coming to my house. Like there was one day when I walked up to the front yard and our porch had boxes that were, I mean, there was probably 6 feet of boxes just stacked up on the front porch of things that were getting delivered. And our poor mailman, he walked up and he's like, "So, is this all for the babies?" And I was like, "Yes, yes, I'm gonna say yes to that." Sure. Otherwise, you're going to think we're insane. This is all camera equipment. And so, but they set it up in our sunroom and it was just a really beautiful and seamless process for us every week. We kind of just said, what's our family facing this week? It was very organic in that way. We didn't have any kind of set agenda. And whatever we were facing that week, whatever we had just come out of, we talked about it. And then the producers of the Word on Fire did such a great job. Doug did such a great job during that time of making sure that what we were drawing out was really what was given out into the world. And we actually never saw any of the episodes before they were given to the public. So when everyone was watching them, we were also watching them. And it was just so much fun. And there were so many people, especially during the pandemic, that told us afterwards, we were with you during the pandemic. You were in our living room. I was on treadmills with various people. They're like, I would get on the treadmill and just watch Meet the Bulmans that week. And so right now there are currently no plans for a second season. We get a lot of questions about that. The kids are constantly like, "Mom, we could do it. We could shoot it and we could edit." And I'm like, "You act like your mom has got all this extra time." And so if the Holy Spirit leads it, but I know right now there are no plans for that. But it was such a great time, and it still is bearing a lot of fruit, I think.
Yes. Gosh, one episode that just popped in my head as you were just talking was when you were, like you said, you're very pregnant with the twins and you did the watermelon challenge with Jason.
Oh my gosh. That actually popped up in my time hop or something the other day, and the kids were sitting there, and Gabriel was like, "That was the best." Like, "That was the best, Mom." Like, the watermelon dad failed. They were just like, "That was so good." I was like, "Yeah, we should do that like once annually to remind him."
Yes.
So
Oh my
great.
goodness. Yes. I just loved, yeah, just how natural you guys were and just it just truly showed the joy of family life. And yeah, no, so thank you
Thank
for
you.
doing that.
Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished.
Oh my goodness. So I would love to hear. Okay, I just have so many questions for you,
Oh,
Rachel.
you're
Okay,
fine.
okay. So I'll ask you two questions, and you can decide which one you want to answer first. One, I had read somewhere, like I think on your website, that you do weightlifting. Is that true? Uh,
That is true. That is true.
okay. I'm so intrigued by that. But then also, the two books that you authored. Can you just share a little bit about those? So whichever one you want to answer first.
Sure. So I'll answer the weightlifting thing first, So I mean, I remember in college, one of my really good friends, Chris, he was on the basketball team and he was like, "Rachel, you should lift weights." So we started lifting weights. It was hilarious. I mean, he is hilarious. So I remember being in the gym with him and I was working out arms. And at the time I was Protestant and I was like a praise and worship pastor. And he was like, "Rachel," he's like, "everyone's going to be super distracted by your arms when you're leading praise and worship. They're just going to be like, 'Oh, let's worship the Lord. Look at Rachel's biceps.'" So I like have a very vivid memory of working out with Chris. And so then fast forward, I get married and I'm still lifting a little bit, um, just doing the random, visits to the gym. And then after Jeremiah, I remember just looking in the mirror and I was like, "Dude, I got to get it together." Because I mean, I wasn't like horribly overweight or anything, but I didn't feel like myself. I was definitely had put on some weight and really wanted to kind of get back into shape. So I discovered this like 12-week plan or something from bodybuilding.com. And it was like a weightlifting plan. And then it also had like a meal plan attached to it. And I mean, it was unbelievable. And not only was it unbelievable because it transformed my body, but it transformed the way that I understood myself and my confidence. And so um I then started to have a different relationship with food. Like I love to eat. I mean, everybody loves to eat, right? If you say that you don't, you're lying. Everyone loves to eat. And so from that point on, food became something that wasn't just something that I did for pleasure, but it was also just became a fuel. I need to eat this because this is what my body needs so that I can go into the gym and perform the way that I need to perform. Um, and so then I started to really kind of have, I guess, a little bit of a conversion about my understanding of what working out looked like. And so by that time, Jeremiah's 11. So that was about, I don't know, I was probably had just gotten into my 30s or something around this point. And so I remember realizing that my body, and because of all the hormones that from all the pregnancies, that my body performed a lot better when I was actually building muscle instead of running or doing some sort of cardio or doing a class. And not to knock any of those things, those definitely work. But for me and for my body, I was really starting to notice a difference when I would do strength training and resistance training. And so I really started to lift a lot. And I mean, it got to the point where I was doing deadlifts and I could lift over 250 pounds on deadlifts and loved it. That was like a huge goal. Like, let me get in here and be able to lift more than my own body weight doing these various things. And so also during the midst of all of this, my one of my sisters, Michaela, is a professional bodybuilder. And so she's doing all this, and I'm seeing her body completely change, and she's falling in love with it. And it's just so much fun watching her, and then also doing it myself. And so, I don't know. I mean, it was very important for me to not just feel strong, but to also look strong. Like I wanted people to look and go, not, oh gosh, she's so beautiful or she's so thin, but I wanted to be like, she could probably kick my butt. So that was definitely a life goal. And so, and the other day, it definitely came back into fruition because my boys have been lifting now in the mornings before my husband goes to work. They go up to the gym. And so they've been talking about their muscles. It's hilarious because they think it's like happening instantaneously. So like come in later that day and like my arm look bigger. I'm like, sure, girl, I'm like so much bigger now. But they came in and they said, Jeremiah's like, Mom, we just really need to see your biceps. They're like, because we were just talking about our biceps and we just wanted to know if you have biceps. And so I did. I flexed on them, and they said, Jeremiah's like, dang, Mom. He's like, look at Mom's biceps. And I was like, wow, I have finally arrived. And so I've done all of this just for that, just for that reaction beyond anything else. So it's just lots of fun. And so other than that, one of my really good friends, or one of a guy that works with my husband, not a good friend, but we were out doing something. I think we were doing like a holiday party, and it was bowling. And we got in the car, and my husband's like, he's like, yeah, so and so came up to me tonight and said, he's like, when I'm with you and your wife, I just feel really out of shape. And he said, he's like, and tonight I couldn't decide whose shoulders I wanted more, like to have shoulders like your wife or to have shoulders like you. So, life goals. And so those are mine. And I definitely have more weightlifting tips. There was a time when my Instagram was just me lifting. And so how far we've come. But shoot me those in the DM and I'll let you know. But it's so much fun. And so I think everybody has their whatever goals, but mine was always to be able to lift things that normal people my size wouldn't be able to lift. So
That is amazing.
oh, thank you. It's actually part of my bio, which is hilarious. But I walk out, they're like, yeah, and she really enjoys weightlifting. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe I should take that out. It's a little weird for me to mention that to the room. I love it. Thank you. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep it.
Keep it forever. Because literally, when I read that, I was like, "Say what? I need to know more."
Gosh. Thank you. And then your other question was about the two books. Um,
Yes.
so the first one was called With All Her Mind, A Call to the Intellectual Life. And that one was published with Word on Fire. And that one was just, oh my gosh, that's my baby. It's just such an exciting thing. The Word on Fire it's 17 essays from different Catholic women about the influence of the intellectual life on their own. And they talk about different facets of it. Sister Josephine talks about prayer and silence. We have Jennifer Frey, who is a professor of humanities out in Oklahoma, and she talks about leisure and how leisure is important to the intellectual life. You talk about Haley Stewart, who is the editor for the Word on Fire Publishing's children's sector, she writes her essay on literature and how powerful literature is. One of the most beautiful things that she says in there is like, when you meet two people that have read the same book, it's like it doesn't matter where they're at in the world, they're still in the same place together because they've read the same book. And so, just a lot of different facets of the intellectual life that we don't think about. And it really came about because there's this book that was written in like the 50s or 60s from a Dominican Sertalanges, Father Sertalanges, and he writes this book called The Intellectual Life. It's a fantastic book, but it's dated because it's written by a man. It's also written in the 50s or 60s. So he refers to Beatrice, the woman in the book, as like she just likes to talk and she shops a lot. And so like it's very, very dated. And so I remember thinking, if we were gonna do any book for women, this would be a great book for women. And so, and it's just not um I, flowery and floral. It's challenging and hard and dense, and I've had so many women that have come up to me and said, gosh, we were just really longing for a book like this that we wouldn't be ashamed to read in public because it doesn't look like, like that doesn't have like a motif on the front. They're just it was such a gift to be able to bring that into the world. And then the other book is called Becoming Wife, Saying Yes to More Than the Dress, and that was from our Sunday Visitor. And for me, during the diaconate formation, this book really came about because there, like we were talking about earlier, the wives have to be a part of it. And the question really was like, why? Why do we have to be here? We're not receiving the holy orders, obviously. We're also not, some of us weren't going to get our masters. And so it was kind of like, why are we doing this? Why do we have to be here? And so during all of that and during my own prayer and my own study during that time, this book came about. You are saying yes to a whole lot more than whatever you're going to wear on your wedding day. You're saying yes to whatever vocations, whatever struggles. You're saying yes to your spouse. And so this book is kind of a philosophical and theological reflection on that. And it's my other baby. So yeah,
Mm.
those are the two books.
Gosh, thank you for sharing. And I will definitely link both of those books in the show notes. And I look forward to reading both of them. Gosh, Rachel, this has been such a joy speaking with you. Like, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and I'm sure other people feel like that too.
Oh,
um,
thank you.
Gosh, thank you for your time and for your yes and for your joy and for just being you. And thank you to your husband too for just loving you so well. Like that just shines through our
Amen.
conversation. So thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time. And remember, when you say yes to God, you change the world. God bless you.